Hello and welcome to Safe for Work PMQs, in which I'm not allowed to swear. I hope you can all hear me out there in internet land. I've got no comments coming up yet, so that's always a bit of a worry if I'm actually streaming or not. And yeah, questions for the Prime Minister. Clive Lewis has asked a question that is, I guess, blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Right, now we get to ask an actual question. Oh, sorry about this. Oh, no comment here. Thanks, Dave. Sorry, I just had to go into Google to see if my comments were coming up, but they obviously are. If you can comment, then wonderful. Yeah. Okay. Let's do it.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very sorry to hear about the Honourable Gentleman's constituent with regard to dentistry. He'll know
this is about, so Clive Lewis just asked a question about dentistry and the fact that these clowns have decided that dentistry should only be something that rich people can afford.
10% more activity can happen, and DHSE are currly
absolute
talking about
scumbags
reforming
that
the
they
dentistry
are.
contract with the presidents in practice to increase activity further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Gordon, unfortunately, has been receiving cancer treatment at the Mount Vernon Hospital, which will soon fall within Sadiq Khan's new ULEZ boundaries.
Oh, they're going on
As
about
Gordon
ULEZ again.
continues his
That's all
daily
I've got.
treatment,
This is it.
he will now be expected to
ULEZ,
pay
trans people,
£12.50
and boat
or
people.
buy a new compliant vehicle.
This is just the future.
Does the Prime Minister agree with me
18
that
months.
the British people already have enough on without Labour's London Mayor stretching household budgets down?
Yeah, so they're going on about it. This is it. This is all they're going to go on about now. Bloody ULEZ. I don't care. Don't live in London. I want it to be as green as possible. I honestly couldn't give a toss about this.
He
will know that literally millions of people in the country do not give a toss about London's ULEZ.
Against the overwhelming views of residents and businesses. And what's more, his plan to raise costs for hard-working families is totally backed by the leader of the opposition.
What?
Perhaps he can now tell us why.
What?
I don't think he's responsible for the questions.
Yeah.
We now come to the leader of the opposition, Keir Starmer.
Right, here comes Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank all those who took part in the coronation celebrations over the weekend? And can I also take this chance to wish all the very best to my brilliant and talented constituent, May Muller, who is representing the UK at Eurovision in Liverpool this weekend.
Woo!
The whole country is behind you, May. Now, Mr. Speaker, this time last week, the Prime Minister had to correct the record on misleading claims he made about employment numbers.
Yes.
Can he provide a further update? Now
Thomas.
he's
Nice
cost
to have you here.
1,000 Tory councillors their jobs.
Yeah. 1,000 Tory councillors. 1,000. 1,063.
Mr. Speaker, let me pass on my best wishes to May as well for this weekend Eurovision. With regard to the local elections, Mr. Speaker, maybe I can just offer the honourable gentleman a tiny bit of advice from one of his predecessors. From one of his predecessors.
He wants to give advice.
One of his predecessors, Tony Blair.
Trashed
who
him.
I was reading the other day. What did Tony Blair? He said the right honourable gentleman can be as cocky as he likes about the local elections. Come a general election, policy counts.
What?
And we know,
What?
Mr. Speaker.
Yeah, your policy is really, really unpopular. You have the fewest number of councillors you've ever had in the last 50 years, mate.
He doesn't have any.
Fewest number of councillors over the last 50 years.
The Prime Minister said he was going to lose 1,000 seats, and then he managed it. After 13 years, a Tory promise they actually haven't broken.
Yeah.
And this is the Prime Minister who's only had to fight for two things in his life. Last year, he lost a Tory beauty contest to the member for South West Norfolk, who then lost to a lettuce.
To a lettuce.
Last week, when he finally came into contact with voters, he lost everywhere. No matter who the electorate is, the Prime Minister keeps entering a two-horse race and somehow finishing third. Given his track record, who does he think he's actually got a mandate from?
Mr. Speaker, it's a bit rich to hear about mandates from the person who's broken every single promise
It's true.
he was elected on.
What?
I mean, go through the list, Mr. Speaker. Nationalisations,
Oh, I see. Now he's
NHS
gonna go through the
outsourcing,
pledges.
universal credit, and now tuition
Not a
fees.
manifesto, mate.
He was,
Not a
Mr. Speaker,
manifesto.
he was for them all before he was against them. He's not just the softy, he's the flaky too.
But he was for tuition fees, now he's against them. No, the other way
Well,
around.
Mr. Speaker, I can understand why the Prime Minister's trying to wish away his terrible results, but peddling nonsense just doesn't work. Up
great
and down
response,
the
mate.
country, people want the government to focus on the cost of living, but he's got no answers.
None.
Is he planning to carry on as if nothing happened
Yes.
and ignore the
Yes, he is.
message he was sent last week? Or is he going to do what a Labour government would do and announce an immediate freeze in council tax bills?
Mr. Speaker, I know he's asked his Labour councillors rightly to focus on the cost of living. Perhaps they could start with reducing council tax to the level in Conservative-run areas.
What?
But, Mr. Speaker,
Council tax
we're
is
getting on
higher
with
in
halving
Tory
people's
run
energy
areas.
bills, freezing
You
fuel
pick
duty
one
to help them
band
with
and
the
say,
cost
oh,
of
it's
living.
cheaper in
What
this
is
one
stopping
band, like
him
band D,
having a plan?
in a
is that
Conservative
unfortunately
council,
his
but
shadow
it's higher in
chancellor
all the other
recently
bands,
said
higher
she's
overall.
discovered she's got a problem, Mr. Speaker. She realised that she actually, this is what she said, she actually has to,
supposed to be an
shock
answer.
horror, say where the money's going to come from.
What is this?
Answer
the question.
With a
Lindsay
£90
Hoyle,
billion
get him to answer the
black hole in
question.
her plans, she's got a lot of work to do.
Why are you talking about somebody else?
Mr. Speaker, there's only one party that broke the economy, and they're sitting right there.
Yeah.
And it seems to me,
He sounds really immature,
to quote
Pepe.
one of his more electorally
Pathetic.
successful predecessors, nothing has changed. Still blaming other people, still refusing to take the necessary action, still not listening to the country.
Yeah.
And on council tax, it's quite simple. A Labour government would give every council the grant they need to freeze those bills, fully paid for
I'd love
by
parliamentary
ending the
VAR.
handouts he's giving to oil and gas giants.
That's
So
what this
I
should
ask
be.
him
That's what
again,
this show should
now
be.
his plan has
Parliamentary
been
VAR.
utterly rejected. Why won't he do the same?
Mr. Speaker, just a quick history lesson. While he was busy softening sentences 13 years ago, let me just remind him what we inherited. It was the largest deficit in the G7 from Labour.
Now it's even
Higher
bigger.
unemployment.
Now it's even bigger.
The coffers were totally empty.
No, they
And
weren't.
it didn't stop there, Mr. Speaker.
coffers weren't empty.
After that, they
How did you
wanted
afford
a longer
anything?
lockdown. And now,
What? They opposed
won't
lockdown?
even
What?
oppose
They wanted lockdown? What
the
did they want?
picketers and the
Hey?
protesters, Mr. Speaker.
Answer the question.
Even in
He's just in pure
opposition,
attack
they're
mode, but he
damaging
just
the
sounds like
economy.
some out of touch toff. He's just peaked the mic
He's
levels.
just not listening, is he? Even after the entire country, Mr. Speaker, from the Peak District to the Garden of England, rejected his government last week, he still thinks that protecting oil and gas profits is more important than freezing bills. Now, I'm sure the Prime Minister must finally have met some working people in recent weeks. Did any of them understand why he insists on protecting his precious non-dom tax status rather than scrapping it and using the money to train thousands of doctors and nurses?
Well, Mr. Speaker, he said that this money would fund the NHS workforce, but that plan was actually looked at by one of his own colleagues recently. Now that person said that it would discourage doctors and nurses from coming here. And that there was a £2 billion shortfall in his sums. Who said that? It was Alistair Darling. He might remember those days. It's when Labour bankrupted the economy.
Labour didn't bankrupt the economy. You can't bankrupt an
I think
economy.
that is the definition of nonsense. And this is the price of having a tired,
remember those
worn-out
days from
government
13 years ago.
fronted by a Prime Minister who boasts he's never had a working-class friend. He's smiling his way through the cost of living crisis, gloating about success while waiting lists grow. He's pretending that crime, house building, schools are all just doing fine, while handing the country 24 tax rises, all with his name on them. How does he think the Tories can possibly provide the answers Britain needs when the whole country has already told him they're the problem, not the solution?
Can't argue with that.
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is right. We all do say some silly things when we're younger. I was a teenager, and he'll know what I'm talking about, because I think in his 40s he was still talking about abolishing the monarchy, Mr. Speaker. But it's
A lot of people would agree with it right now, mate. Although you don't want to listen to what the monarch has to say about your horrific illegal
It's the same old
people
guff from
policy.
him every week, Mr. Speaker. All politics and no action. We're getting on with halving people's energy bills, freezing fuel duty, cutting the costs of car
put them
care,
sky high and then
boosting
taking a few
pay.
percent off?
While he's busy plotting coalitions, we're getting on and delivering for the British.
Oh, he's
people.
delivered. He said it. Delivered. Quick, put some money in the tin.
Mr. Speaker, this Saturday is Surrey Day. A chance
sorry.
for locals and visitors to celebrate
No, really.
everything
I'm sorry.
wonderful about our county,
nothing
including
wonderful
our
about it, sorry, there are a
beautiful
bunch of
historic
Tory
High
voting
Street in Guildford with its
bastards.
independent shops. But frequently raised with me
Frequently,
is empty
the
shops.
smell of the poo
high
that we
rents
keep
with
putting
high
into our
business
rivers.
rates makes it difficult for independent retailers to compete with national chains. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that this government must do everything it can to support our high streets as part of our plan?
The
to
high
boost
street's
economic
dead
growth?
thanks to these guys. The high street is dead thanks to the Tory party. Now they're talking about protecting it.
For local communities, not just in Surrey, but around
Go on,
the country.
platitudes. Go
That's
on,
why
give some
we are
platitudes.
abolishing business rates for hundreds of thousands of eligible businesses in the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, and investing billions of pounds through the High Streets Fund and our Towns Fund to support
Really?
local communities up and down the country.
Why all the,
SNP
shops are all boarded
spokesperson
up?
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr.
gonna
Speaker.
have a go at Labour again,
If the Prime Minister was to go to the boot of his Land Rover and pull out some placards which said "Save our nom-doms," would he expect to be arrested by the police?
Ooh, nice one.
Mr. Speaker,
Save our
Mr.
non-doms.
Speaker, can I first put on record
my
my
wife.
thanks to the police for all their hard work over the weekend, ensuring that the coronation was a success. Now, look, on this issue, Mr. Speaker, we believe the police should have powers to make
he's got
sure that they
terrible
can
skin.
protect the public from unnecessary and serious disruption. I respectfully recognise that the honourable gentleman disagrees with our position. I guess the question for both of us is, what does the honourable leader of the opposition think about this? Because it's quite hard to keep up.
Can I just remind the Prime Minister? It's Prime Minister's questions. For him to
Oh, thank God! Thanks, he said it.
Not for what
Bloody
the
hell! That took about half an hour, didn't it?
Mr. Speaker, what we're talking about here is that nurses strike, doctors strike, firefighters strike, protest, firefighters protest, and of course, Republicans protest as well. And they do so because it's a fundamental right within our democracy to be able to protest. So is the Prime Minister seriously saying that moving forward, you can have your rights, but only on his terms?
Yes, that's what he's saying.
Mr. Speaker,
only if
it
you're
is also the
protesting for
right of the
something that
British
he
public to be able to
doesn't
go about their ordinary day-to-day lives without undue serious disruption. That's why it's right that the police have extra powers. I respect that the honourable gentleman disagrees with that, but we think it is right, and people will see every day on TV their lives being disrupted. They're not able to get to school,
Came in
to get to
2019.
hospital appointments,
Bloody
and
hell.
indeed to get to work. They should be able to do that, and the police should have powers to stop those who are preventing that from
3.5 years
happening.
we've had Lindsay
Thank
Hoyle.
you, Mr. Speaker. It was an honour to welcome the Australian Prime Minister to Barrow last week so he could meet some of our fantastic apprentices, see the submarine programme and reaffirm his commitment
The
to
Labour
AUKUS
Prime
programme
Minister.
will deliver thousands of jobs
Labour
to our
Prime
constituency
Minister.
and keep our nation
That'd be
safe.
the Prime Minister from the
But what
Labour
was a national
Party.
endeavour is now an international one, and it's going to require a whole-of-government approach to get it over the line and deliver it well. So with that in mind, could I invite my right honourable friend
Police
to
has
Barrow to see the programme
apologised.
for himself, and also to meet with me to see how we can best leverage the opportunities from this for the people of Barrow for generations to come.
Well, my honourable friend is a
Australia.
fantastic advocate for his local industry and community, and he's right, the SSN AUKUS submarines
Australia,
will
mate.
be built in Barrow, the home of the British submarine industry. It will create thousands of new jobs, not just in Barrow, but across the UK. That's why the
Barrow, in
government
fairness,
is investing billions to
Tories
modernise the
way.
enterprise, and I look forward to taking him up on his invitation.
And David.
Mr. Speaker, last week many lifelong Conservative voters turned to the Liberal Democrats to be their strong local champions. They delivered their verdict on the government's failure to hold water companies to account for dumping raw sewage into our rivers and onto our beaches. Last year, water bosses were paid £15 million in bonuses, rewarded for destroying our precious natural environment.
Lindsay Hoyle, shut your politicians up so we can hear what this guy has to say.
They should never have been entitled to them in the first place.
It's Ed Davey, it's the head of the...
So will the Prime Minister ban these sewage bonuses so that the dumping actually stops?
Come on.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I struggle to hear the full question, but I think in one sense it doesn't really matter, because we all know the Liberal Democrats say one thing here and another thing locally anyway. And it is remarkable. No wonder he's attracted.
Are you accusing others of hypocrisy? Mr. Speaker, this is like hypocrisy inception, isn't it?
On tuition fees. It must be like looking in the mirror.
Ben Bradley.
To highlight some success with Mansfield District Council now having more Conservative councillors than at any point in my lifetime after last week's local elections. I'm very proud of our local team. But one thing we heard on the doorstep was frustration. A frustration and expectation that government needs to deliver on key pledges. There has been a commitment to our part of the world that we'll be given the clout, the investment to catch up with other regions that historically have had more than we've had. So will the Prime Minister take the opportunity to reiterate his commitment and to my constituents reassure them that he will support growth and investment in the East Midlands?
Well, Mr. Speaker, my honourable friend is a tireless advocate for the East Midlands, and in particular, I welcome the devolution deal that has been agreed among the 4 local authorities in the region, something I know my honourable friend has campaigned for, and like him, I look forward to those new devolved institutions being established as soon as possible to drive economic growth in his community.
Caroline Lucas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has previously declared, and I quote, "My daughter is the climate change champion in our house." I wonder if he's asked her what she thinks about Rosebank, the biggest undeveloped oil field in the North Sea, which would blow climate targets, create more emissions than 28 of the world's poorest countries combined, involve the obscene transfer of £4 billion of taxpayers' money to a Norwegian energy firm, Equinor, and do nothing for energy security since the vast majority of the oil will be exported. If he gives it the green light, will he be able to look his daughter in the eye and honestly say that he has done everything in his power to give her and all other young people a livable future?
Minister. Mr. Speaker, as the Independent Committee for Climate Change has acknowledged, we will need fossil fuels for the next few decades as we transition to a greener future. And during that period,
as people have said, we definitely need all this oil.
To not invest in the resources we have here at home,
to invest $4 billion of our money, and give it to a private Norwegian company,
and import them at twice the carbon emissions as our local resources. It is an economically illiterate policy.
No, you are economically illiterate, mate, because that's not how it works. We have to sell on the international price chart.
Last June, the government committed to bring forward a horticulture strategy to identify ways to expand British production of horticulture. And the importance of this was underlined by some of the supply chain challenges we saw earlier this spring. But in the last week, there's been speculation that the government
that was the best question we've had so far, to be honest with you.
Can the Prime Minister give us any reassurance that the government remains committed to expanding this important British industry?
Tory there, sitting there.
Thank my honourable friend for all of his
Famous
work
for being
campaigning
corrupt.
in this area. We are delivering for the horticulture sector, and it will benefit from the £168 million investment to drive innovation and support fruit production. And that's why we also passed the new genetic technology act, Mr. Speaker, taking advantage of our Brexit opportunities to unlock the potential of new technologies. But I look forward to discussing this and other ideas at our new upcoming food summit.
He's getting paid like
Julie Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Prime Minister or any of his ministers given commitments to BP, Equinor or any other company about contracts
if you want to watch
Teesworks site?
On the Labour Party YouTube page.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, contracts of the site would be a commercial matter for the companies involved.
Mr. Speaker, our farmers provide our food and our countryside's future. But there's concern among some Oxfordshire farmers that the new schemes under DEFRA's agricultural transition plan aren't ready for farmers to access them to make up the shortfall from the basic payment scheme. Will my right honourable friend push his colleagues in DEFRA to roll out the rest of the SFI standards as soon as possible and to consider double stacking SFI and countryside stewardship payments to ensure that Oxfordshire's farmers get the support they need?
Prime Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question, and of course we want to make sure that we continue to support farmers to produce healthy, nutritious food. We are pressing ahead with the ELM scheme, fine-tuning them though to make sure that they work even better for farmers. We want to make sure there's enough flexibility in the sustainable farming initiatives, and that's why DEFRA have designed the schemes with farmers in mind, enabling them to do more and to make sure that they can use countryside stewardship schemes on the same plots of land. But I look forward to discussing this with him
or farming for that matter.
Alan Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Stirling, we've got a really potentially very exciting development at Forthside on former Ministry of Defence land, and sadly the development's got a bit stuck over a dispute about the cost of the decontamination of that land. Now, I'll work with anybody to get a result for Stirling. Will the Prime Minister meet with me and representatives of Stirling Council to get this development unblocked and make the progress we all want to see?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we have invested in Stirling previously to unlock investment and drive growth, and I'll ensure that the honourable gentleman gets the meeting he needs with the relevant minister to make progress.
Mark Warburton.
The Prime Minister and I share a profound optimism about the power of technology, and AI in particular has the power to revolutionise public services and our private sector
It's an Undertaker.
But does he agree with me that it comes with risks? And while there are unrealistic calls to pause research into it altogether, it is crucial for us to work with our allies around the world so that the global norms that emerge in this important area reflect our values.
Well, my honourable friend speaks with experience and knowledge on this issue, and I absolutely agree with the thrust of his question. Whilst it would be implausible and wrong to halt the development of this technology, it is right that we ensure that there are appropriate guardrails in place as we look to exploit its opportunities. Those are the conversations we are having, not just with the companies involved, but also with our allies around the world, and he can expect further progress in the coming weeks and months.
Mike Nolly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Following on from his earlier answer, as the Prime Minister knows, an Eat Out to Help Out scheme was introduced in August 2020, which increased demand for eating in restaurants by some 216% compared to 2019, with figures now showing that over 17,500 retail chain stores closed in 2020 alone, affecting nearly 35,000 employees. Would or has the Prime Minister considered a similar scheme for bricks and mortar retail, bricks versus clicks, if you like, as part of the wider plan?
Sunak is a human in human form.
High streets and
What?
Well,
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the way that we are supporting high streets and town centres is through making sure that we cut business rates in England. Obviously, the Scottish Government will receive Barnett consequentials from those actions, but now hundreds of thousands of local businesses on our high streets don't pay any business rates at all. And on top of that, through the Levelling Up Fund, Towns Fund and others, we're investing directly in local communities. Indeed, in his own, where I know council leaders
you've said yourself at your own face that you take money from deprived areas and give it to areas like Tunbridge bloody Wells.
My right friend recently scored a very rare own goal by backing Stockton Football Club in the Northern Premier League East Playoff Final, which eventually saw Long Eaton United win on penalties. In the interest of good sportsmanship, will he now congratulate Ian Deakin and his team on their resounding victory, wish Long Eaton United every success in the league for next season, and join me
like watching a bad
at
comedian
Grange
down on
Park
stage
to cheer on Long Eaton United for the next season.
Oh my God, you're running a country! What are you talking about?
Yeah, well,
what was that even a question?
Congratulating her local football team and their stunning success. I'm not sure.
What a waste of time. Is this all the Tories have got left? We've got to ask a question. What should we ask about? Oh, the local football team did all right. Yeah, all right. We'll ask about that.
Are not in the place I would like them to be.
Jamie Still.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister may well have seen the astonishing sight of a former Scottish Government Minister standing up in the Chamber of Scottish Parliament and tearing up, literally ripping into pieces, the Scottish Government's highly protected marine area proposal. This proposal is deeply controversial all over Scotland and has even led to it being compared with its second Highland clearances. Is this not now the time? Is this not now the time for the UK government to step in and work with the devolved...
There you have it.
Mr. Speaker, I will not be silenced because it matters... This matters deeply to my constituents. Deeply. Is it not time the UK government to step in, work with the devolved administrations to come up with a scheme that works and is acceptable, a conservation scheme that is acceptable in our fishing communities all around the UK?
The honourable gentleman makes an excellent point, and he is a passionate champion, as he should be, for his local fishing communities. And he's right to highlight the concerns that have been raised, not just by them, but by members of the SNP's own party.
Reminds me a bit of
about the potentially
Nandor,
damaging impact of their plans to introduce the highly protected marine areas in the way that they are. I would encourage the SNP government to continue working with the Scottish fishing industry and coastal communities to understand their concerns. And as we've seen them recently U-turn on other poor thought-out decisions, hopefully they can relook at this one too.
Manchester.
The United Kingdom has a strong, deep, multi-dimensional relationship with Pakistan. And there are over 1.5 million British Pakistanis here, and many of them are dual nationals, as am I. The Prime Minister will have seen the scenes coming out from Pakistan, the civil unrest where people have lost their lives due to the detention of the Prime Minister Imran Khan. There are real concerns about the circumstances of his detention and the right to have a fair trial. The United Kingdom has in the past sent observers to hearings around the world to ensure natural justice is done. Has the Prime Minister considered that? If not, will he consider it?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend for his question. The UK, of course, has a long-standing and close relationship with Pakistan, and this weekend, especially as Commonwealth partners. The arrest of the former Prime Minister is an internal matter for Pakistan. We support peaceful, democratic processes and adherence to the rule of law, and we are monitoring the situation
in this country, do you?
Roland Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A little boy has gone to school today in shoes that don't fit him because his parents can't afford new ones. A little girl had water on her cornflakes because her mum had no money for milk. These are real stories from Faith and Families, a charity in my constituency that deal with poverty every day. Poverty that is causing prolonged shame and leading to a mental health crisis. Faith and Families are worried about these kids. I'm worried about these kids. If the Prime Minister is worried about these kids, what's he going to do about it?
Mr. Speaker, we don't want any child to grow up in poverty, and that's why I'm proud that there are 1.7 million fewer people living in poverty today than in 2010 because of the actions of this and previous Conservative governments. That includes hundreds of thousands of children. And we are providing incredible support to the most vulnerable in our society as we speak. Just last week, the first of our cost of living payments went out, £900 to help the most vulnerable families in our society. Those are our values, and we will keep supporting them as the inflation remains high.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Earlier in questions, the Leader of the Opposition sought to draw attention to council tax rates and council tax increases and offering some crocodile tears in the process. Can I draw attention to the Prime Minister's attention that whereas we have seen 43% increase in council tax rates since 2010 in England, the increase in Wales has been a staggering 67%. So therefore, is it not the case we should be looking at what Labour do rather than what Labour say?
I think that's because funding from the central government has been cut to the bone.
My right honourable friend makes an excellent
remember
point.
austerity
the Leader of the Opposition
still going
is very
on to
fond
this
in
day.
telling us that Labour in Wales is his blueprint for how he would like to run the country. And as we've seen, all it means is higher bills for hard-working British families.
More money for the rich, that's how you want to run the country.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 2 years, the Drax Power Station in Yorkshire has, on average, burned almost 20,000 tonnes of trees every single day, releasing an equivalent amount of carbon into the atmosphere. During that time, whilst our constituents have struggled with their heating bills, the private company running Drax has received £1.5 million of subsidy through the government's energy policy every single day.
Whoa!
This
Jesus
is set to continue
Christ.
until 2027.
What?
Can I ask the Prime Minister, will he step in and review this grotesque distortion of energy policy, which incentivises deforestation whilst making no contribution to tackling the climate emergency?
Well, Mr. Speaker, while not being able to comment on the contract details of one particular company, what I can say is that our record on this issue is that since the benchmark was established, emissions in this country have fallen by almost 50%.
I can't wait for this shower to get flushed
whilst
as well.
at the same time, we've grown the economy by 2/3.
No, you haven't.
Something I know the SNP government
You
is
haven't,
focused on.
you haven't grown the economy at all. It's stagnated. You're lying. You haven't cut emissions. They've gone up. You're lying.
Renewables like offshore wind decline from £140 an hour to around 40.
That's nothing to do with you. That's nothing to do with you. The decline in the cost of wind power has nothing to do with you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Plastic pollution is a scourge of modern day society.
You know what?
My
Conservatives
10-minute
are a
rule
scourge
bill
of modern day society.
seeks to have microfiber, microplastic filters fitted in all commercial and domestic washing machines, legislation which France and other countries have already moved forward with.
Yeah.
Will the Prime Minister, who has already done an enormous amount
Drax
in
is a green
tackling
washing
plastic
power
pollution,
station. Yeah.
will he
Who would have
organise a
thought
meeting
that a power station
between
named
me
after a
and
Bond
the
villain would be
stakeholders,
evil?
particularly washing machine manufacturers, with the Secretary of State to discuss this very important issue?
He doesn't give a shit.
Mr. Speaker, we want to tackle microplastic pollution wherever possible, which is why we introduced a microbead ban and a tax on plastic bags. I know my honourable friend has campaigned for filters on washing machines, but he will also know they can be costly to install. DEFRA have outlined plans to make sure that we can use more filters, but I will ensure that he gets the meeting that he needs with the relevant minister to discuss this important matter further.
Yeah, it can be expensive to do that. So
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The government ditching its pledge to recruit 6,000 more GPs is yet another example of the Tories over-promising and under-delivering.
Absolutely.
With teacher recruitment targets missed and housing pledges shelved, why does the Prime Minister think that the only target he's actually met was a loss of 1,000 Tory councillors last week?
Maybe the honourable gentleman can tell us which of the many promises that the Leader of the Opposition made to him when he was campaigning he's most happy that he's U-turned on.
John Hayes. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Lincolnshire's roads, foodstuffs grown in our fine county are transported across the nation. The Highways Authority struggles to fund roads because of the skewed funding formula devised by a previous Labour government. So many of our public services suffer, leasing included. So will the Prime Minister agree to urgently review the local government funding formula, the police funding formula, so that Lincolnshire can have a fair deal?
Well, my right honourable friend is absolutely right to stand up for the particular needs of his rural community. And like him, I recognise that rural areas do often have higher costs of providing services. It's right that those are reflected where we can in funding formulas, but I'll make sure that he gets a meeting with a relevant minister to discuss this important matter further.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 13,450 prepayment meter vouchers have gone unclaimed in my Glasgow Central constituency at a value of over £887,000. Across Scotland, £16.5 million is unclaimed. The Prime Minister's Energy Bill Support Scheme is failing if money which could be helping our vulnerable constituents is resting in his government's account. I recall he's not very familiar with how prepayment meters work, but what will he do to ensure that every single penny gets out of government coffers and into the meters of those who really need it?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful that the Honourable Lady for a Change acknowledged the support that the government is providing to families up and down the country. Particular attention was given in designing those schemes to how to get the support to prepayment meters. The ministers are always engaged with stakeholders to make sure that there is awareness of those schemes, and I'll make sure that we keep up those efforts so that people do get the help that they need and deserve.
were aware that you weren't allowed to vote without ID last week.
Mr. Speaker, it's very interesting that the Leader of the Opposition says about keeping council tax low when the Labour Party voted to increase Morecambe Town Council from historically £400,000 to £200,000 to £2 million.
Ask the Prime Minister a question.
On that basis, I'd like to
Ask
meet with
the
the
Prime
Minister to see where we can find government time to cap parish councils from doing this sort of abhorrent behaviour.
Abhorrent behaviour? We've cut their funding, the national funding to the bone.
That council tax in Labour areas is higher than that in Conservative areas.
No,
which
only in
is
certain
not
bands. Stop lying.
Stop
lying. Stop lying. Stop
Stop
lying. Every time this guy's stood up today, he's lied.
As low as they can be.
He is a liar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Dozens of Sudanese doctors who'd been working in the NHS were stranded and not allowed to return here. Last week, the Minister told us here that the Prime Minister took the decision to get them back. So why hadn't such a straightforward decision been made much earlier by the Home Secretary or the Foreign Secretary? Is it because he's an obsessive micromanager, or is it that his ministers are just not up to the job? Which one is it, Prime Minister?
Mr. Speaker, the honourable gentleman is completely wrong to describe as straightforward a complex and dangerous evacuation in a war zone. And actually, it is actually the case that everyone involved deserves enormous credit for conducting what was the longest and largest evacuation of any Western country from Sudan. During that process, it was right that we moved deliberately and carefully to ensure the security of everyone involved and to prioritise British nationals and their dependents. Now that the operation is complete, we can look back and thank everyone for what was an incredibly successful operation.
So the truth does, it just goes, I think it was a massive success. You go, the thing that you did was awful.
Since 2010, violent crime has dropped by 38% and neighbourhood crime has dropped by over 50%. But one crime that has gone up is fraud. Now, many of us have dealt with constituents who struggle with fraud.
Tories love fraud.
What is the Prime Minister going to do about it?
A bunch of frauds.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker,
being a big fan of fraud.
My friend is absolutely right. 40% of all crime now is
basically
fraud. It's damaging for people's well-being.
£20,000 a year in tax, and it should have been like $2 million.
Just recently launched a new plan to combat fraud with significant new investment, hundreds of new officers to tackle it, and action on social media companies to empower people to take action and to stop fraud happening in the first place. It represents the most comprehensive plan to tackle this issue, and it will make a big difference to families everywhere.
Final question, Stella Creasy.
Final question. I like Stella. Welcome back, Stella.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On Friday, a young man with brilliant potential who was 16, Renell Charles, was brutally murdered on his way out from school in my constituency in Walthamstow. Yesterday, a 16-year-old boy was charged with his murder. Renell's family are heartbroken. Children in my community...
This is sub judice, so rather than go into detail, Stella Creasy.
What I'm saying is those children are terrified to go to school. Their parents are frightened to let them, and the teachers are at their wits' end. They've asked me to come here today, Prime Minister, to beg you to make the epidemic of youth crime in our country a national priority. So will the Prime Minister meet with myself and representatives from my local community to talk about how we can get the mental health and mentoring support these young people need so that every young person in our country has that future they deserve?
Mr. Speaker, I hope my honourable friend, I know the whole House will join me in expressing our sympathies and condolences to Renell's family for what's happened. She's absolutely right. We should do everything we can to tackle violence and murders against young people in particular. I'm pleased that knife crime has fallen by almost 10% and serious violence has fallen by 24% in the last few years. That's because we are giving the police the powers they need, whether that's stop or search, increasing jail terms and confiscating around 90,000 weapons. Of course, we will always look to do more to make sure that our streets are safe for our young people.
All for now.
Okay, let's cut it at that. They've cut the sound. So there we go. Hello. Right. Okay, well, that was another very unproductive Prime Minister's questions. I don't know about you. I don't feel like anything got answered then by the Prime Minister. He does the same routine every bloody week. It's getting really tiresome. He doesn't answer a single question. He gives lies. He massages statistics so that he doesn't actually give the full picture of what is going on in this country. And all round scumbag, as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, he will do nothing because it might highlight his wife's crimes. Yeah. And also the crimes of the Tory party. Don't forget, this is the party that presided over the transfer of billions and billions of pounds of British taxpayers' money and government bonds. So basically, these are gilts that are given at a certain point. They have to be paid back by the government, by us. I say the government. I've got to say by us. It's taxpayers who end up paying this. And because the Tories have borrowed so much, you're going to see your children and your grandchildren pay off the crimes of this administration. It's going to be that bad. They spent £37 billion on a track and trace app that didn't work. Meanwhile, other countries spent a fraction of that amount on track and trace apps that actually worked a lot more effectively than they did. And when it comes to COVID and what was done and what wasn't done during the COVID pandemic, this country's record is absolutely shocking. We locked down late. We didn't close Heathrow. We didn't put a protective ring around nursing homes. We destroyed the whole thing. We blew it up. And then people said, oh, but, it was a pandemic. What could we do? And we say, well, hang on, look at New Zealand. That is an island. And I know it's only got a population of 4.7 million. It's a lot smaller than ours. We're 66.6 million or thereabouts. But the fact remains that they only had a handful of deaths. We had over 100,000. Over 100,000 deaths. People say, oh, but hang on. What about the fact that there's not many people in New Zealand? You can't compare the two. Okay, let's compare us to Japan. Japan's got nearly twice the population of the UK. So it's got about 129 million people living in Japan in much closer proximity. They've got a busier airport in Tokyo than we have at Heathrow. And yet their death rate at the end was about 33,000. Ours started pushing up towards over 150,000. Started pushing up towards 200,000. And not only did we have the worst kind of response to COVID, we also had one of the highest levels of corruption anywhere in the world during the COVID pandemic, a time in which the British government enriched itself and its cronies to a hideous degree, encapsulated by Michelle Mone taking 200 million from the taxpayer, getting PPE that didn't work, that we had to pay for. Then we had to pay to store it. Then we had to pay to destroy it. And she took millions of that money, maybe 27 million of it. 27 million pounds of taxpayers' money. And what did she do? She bought a yacht. She bought a couple of houses in Glasgow for her kids. And there's no one in jail. The police aren't investigating, as far as I know. You kidding me? We're going to talk about fraud? We're going to talk about fraud, are we? Come on, let's talk about fraud. The Tories are a fraud. Every single one of them should be in jail for the crimes they've committed against this country. And they should never see the light of day ever again. And we should take their possessions, their properties, their share portfolios, and share them amongst the population. That's the revolution we need right now. Oh, welcome to level 1, not likely. And Flint Reed says, not to mention the 120k that died because of the Tory PIP and other disability assessments. Indeed. We got Jim Bob singing money, money, money. Monet, money, money. I thought they have so far nearly killed 500,000 at least, says Flint Reed. That's just... And together with austerity, which doesn't work. Which doesn't work. The only times austerity could even be considered to be working is if the government is overspending and you need to rein in that overspending. Our government was not overspending. Austerity didn't have to happen. And if you're going to stimulate an economy, it is the worst thing you can do is to take money out of people's pockets so they can't go and spend it on stuff. Economies work by people spending money. You stop people from spending money because they haven't got any, your economy grinds to a halt. And that very simple way of putting it is our economy for the last 13 years. We had austerity, then we had Brexit, then we had the pandemic, now we've got the invasion of Ukraine. And every time the Tories have had two ways to go, the right way and the wrong way. And every time they have taken the wrong path. And then you've got little Rishi Sunak standing up there. We just saw him in Parliament banging on about how great he is and how great his party is and how wonderful they all are. And it's all a lie. It's all a sick, twisted lie. These people, I don't know. I don't just want them out of power. I want them out of society. I want them in jail for what they've done. If you agree, please join the channel or become a patron over on patreon.com/Labour Social. We're here to create a community and have communication with the Labour Party. And eventually, when Labour win the next election, fingers crossed, we'll be in a position where we can actually talk to our MPs one-to-one. We can have weekly or even daily shows where we actually have people on that are making these decisions. Because at the moment, we have no access. We have no access at all to our government because we're not millionaires. Maybe someone in the chat is a millionaire. If you are, lend us a fiver. But generally speaking, the vast majority of us, 60 million of us or whatever, are not millionaires. And we can't afford to have influence over anything that the government is doing. We're told to put up and shut up. People voted for this. No, they didn't. Nobody voted for this. No one in the right mind voted for this. So, anyway, that's it for Prime Minister's questions today. Hope I didn't swear too much. I think I let 2 swears out. It's very difficult. I used to do a show called Not Safe for Work Prime Minister's Questions, in which I swore a lot. I've tried to tidy up my image, get myself a tie. It's not wrong if you're a sociopathic criminal, though, Graham. Well, you know. You know me well, Flint. No, I'm joking. Anyway, but yes, I will return. Well, no, Phil Morehouse will be here in the morning at 9:30 for another morning brew where we're talking live and taking your comments about what's happening that morning. And yeah, and I'll be in the chat, so I'll be here in the chat, chatting away. So until then, thank you very, very much for watching. Thank you to all of my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. If you do want to become a patron, you don't want to become a YouTube member and get access to our Discord server, our dedicated, exclusive Labour Social Discord server, please sign up and I'll give you access as an early bird. And if any of you are members of the YouTube channel or this YouTube channel or patrons and you haven't got access to the Discord server yet, please send me a message, let me know, and I'll sort that out for you. Okay, right, thanks very much for watching, and until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.